Seriously, this video is just my human face for the whole thing. I recommend nobody ever watch it. This is a one-off thing. We'll be going back to normal after this and probably never doing this again. You know, I haven't been taking care of the beard all that well. Probably should do better with that. Kind of scraggly right now. Not very soft. Not that it's ever very soft. But it's been better in the past. Anyway, this is why my chin always looks kind of weird nowadays on camera. I have to wear a bandage thing to keep it in place. I'm kind of sick of bandages, to be honest with you. Maybe I'll show you afterwards how that whole thing works. Obviously, we don't get too much behind the scenes here usually. By the way, there will be jump cuts here. That's just inevitable. It's a product of me not being used to talking to camera on the fly like this. Obviously, if I were to get more practice, I would get better at it, but I haven't got that practice. It's not something that I do. I was thinking in the future maybe I would make a channel that involves my face being visible more often. Not this channel, though. This is not going to become a regular occurrence here. Nobody wants that. But in this particular case, I don't care. Anyway, I'm looking over here because it just makes me look less chubby, I think. You know, I got the angle. I'll be real. That's what it is. Is that, and also I find it kind of awkward just to like stare into the camera. You know, do I really want to do that the whole video? I don't think so. I got the red curtain because I like red. My channel has a lot of red. I'm not trying to be Joe Rogan. Anyway, so I was away for quite a while, not making videos, not publishing videos, although luckily I was 2 videos ahead when this whole thing started, so I had something to publish for a while, but still I am way behind on what I need to get done. Obviously, all my supporters expect there to be videos. Not all of them actually expect it, but I expect to provide it to them. So 4 videos a month, minimum. Unfortunately, a little while before all this stuff happened, I had switched to a weekly schedule, and I thought, well, I think I can keep that up. And it turned out that I couldn't, although that wasn't really my fault this time. Going forward, I will. That's the plan. Unless some stupid thing like this happens again. Maybe next time it'll be the appendix. I should probably stop talking like everybody already knows what's going on. I mean, if you're watching the video, that doesn't necessarily mean that you saw the community posts or Discord stuff or anything like that. But those YouTube community posts did get thousands of likes, so that's got to be representative of most of my audience having seen them. I mean, that's around the number of likes my videos normally get. I guess I could be wrong, but I'm kind of assuming that there's a big overlap between people who like my videos and people who like my community posts. Either that, or maybe there's a huge cohort of community post fans who don't like to watch stuff. So anyway, the reason that I initially slowed down on videos a lot was I had really bad consistent pain up here. Right upper quadrant, I guess you would call it. Although at first, it was really hard to place. You know, if I had an attack, which at first it only came in waves in these gall attacks, it would radiate everywhere. It would start in the back. You know, you would have this like back pain up here, and at first I thought, you know, what am I now, 38? At the time, 37. My birthday was in there somewhere, guess what day? And I thought, you know, people talk about all these aches and pains of middle age. They talk about, you get back pain, you get whatever. You start getting heartburn. This is what people say. Up until this point, I haven't had anything like that. Except for this particular case. But I thought maybe that's all it is. Maybe I'm just starting to age out. I'm starting to descend into the grave. And when I couldn't place what it was, I thought it had something to do with my diet, but even that was a little bit questionable. It was a little bit hard to figure out what the link was. I started to eat to try to address issues that I thought it might be, because, you know, it radiated all the way across the chest. I thought maybe heartburn. I've never had heartburn. I don't know what heartburn feels like. I got a digestive system like a beast. I've never had any issues. I can even eat the spiciest food. I get no reaction, no problem whatsoever. Even now, by the way. Like, my system's just built like a tank. So yeah, I started to try to eat a diet that would address, you know, acid issues and bacterial issues, ulcer issues. I tried taking Tums. None of that did anything. I went to the doctor, and the doctor was a pretty good one that is rarely available to see at my local clinic because everybody tries to go to the good ones. And the good ones aren't always there. It's a relatively small town. They tend to be here for a little while and then leave and come back occasionally. So, but anyway, he was pretty good. He immediately ordered all the tests, ulcer bacteria, breath test, blood test, urine test, and an ultrasound, and an ECG for the heart. So actually, in that way, it was pretty helpful. I got a good checkup, coming up to 40. I know my heart's working well. Blood sugar levels are good. Blood pressure is good. Really, everything's good, other than this one particular issue that I had. But anyway, so I went to the ultrasound, and the result that came back from that was that I had a 26 millimeter gallstone lodged in the neck of my gallbladder, immobile. In other words, it had a big cork jammed right into the little tube. So that gallbladder was essentially non-functional. So I went to talk to the doctor at the clinic about it, who was not the good one. It was the one that you can always get an appointment with because everyone avoids them. This was after like a couple of weeks of this problem increasing and getting more regular and more consistent and more severe pain. But yeah, I mean, at this point, like, I was barely able to think. My brain was like non-functional. I would try to get videos done, and it would be just a waste of fucking time. Trying to sit there thinking through an argument, trying to sit there, parsing a topic. Impossible. Just, it became completely impossible. I was having trouble sleeping at night. I could only sleep on one side because the other side would just cause so much pain all night that I would stay awake. It went from strong, aching pain to sharp pain and back and forth. So I was happy to get that ultrasound. But yeah, that doctor, I hadn't seen the ultrasound results yet. I went to the doctor to see the results, and he basically just like muttered what the results were. He kind of like rambled really quickly through it and didn't make it clear what the situation was. And then he told me, yeah, we'll just wait and see. And I told him, dude, this is like life-ruining amounts of pain, and it's been going on consistently for a couple of weeks now. I can't just continue living with this. Like, something has to get done for this. And he said, oh, okay, we can prescribe you painkillers. And I said, okay, well, what is your expectation here? That I'll take painkillers and eventually this stone will mobilize itself and leave my gallbladder? And he said, no, that's extremely unlikely. It's going to stay there. And I said, so what's the plan? You're just going to keep me on painkillers for the rest of my life? And he said, well, if you're not puking and getting fevers, no surgeon is going to take this. Which, by the way, is not true whatsoever. Okay, the situation that I was in is an obvious case of the need to remove the gallbladder. It doesn't matter if you have a fever or if you're puking. Okay, like I said, I have a strong system. That kind of stuff doesn't happen to me that easily. It takes a lot for me to get to that point. Like, if I got to that point, it would already be probably far too late. Like, that would be at the point where the gallbladder had already ruptured. Anyway, so he refused to do anything. He said, I'm not going to refer you to surgery because if I do that, you'll be kicked back to the entire start of the process. You'll have to go through all the blood tests, all the urine tests, the ultrasound all over again to reestablish that you have a gallstone. And then you'll have to establish on top of that that you have acute cholecystitis, which is gallbladder inflammation, enough to warrant the organ being removed. Which, by the way, is another lie. Like, I had the ultrasound which showed the gallstone. It was in my medical records, accessible to every doctor. I would not have to go through that whole process again, even if a surgeon didn't think that it was pressing enough to operate on right then. That's just not true. That is not how that works. Anyway, so he did not refer to surgery. What he did was give me a requisition for a test called a HIDA test, which is some kind of a nuclear medicine test where they inject some kind of a substance into your arm and see how it processes through the system. I guess it gets carried along by the bile in the gallbladder or whatever. And that's supposed to establish if you have acute cholecystitis. So, okay, fine, I guess. More tests. It seems pretty obvious what the situation is at this point, but okay, I'll do another test. Why not? So I went home, called up about the test, assuming that just like the ultrasound, it'd be something that could be done within the week. And they told me, yeah, okay, so end of November. This was in September when I called. And I said, right, I don't think I'm even going to bother with that. I suspect that one way or another, by that point, I'm not going to have a gallbladder to investigate. Because it seemed pretty obvious that the situation was getting to a pretty critical point when there's consistent pain all day, verging into sharp pain often. Fever or no fever, puking or no puking. So, anyway, I waited around for a few days, but the original doctor had told me if you have serious enough pain, if it feels really exceptionally bad, go to the emergency room. So I did that one day. Fortunately, our little hospital has really not heavy use of the emergency room. Compared to a city hospital, it's very laid back. So I went in there, and they gave me an IV for pain. I turned down the hard stuff, morphine. I don't want any of that. I just don't really want to engage with narcotics if I can avoid it. But they gave me an NSAID, which is ketorolac, in other words, anti-inflammatory similar to ibuprofen. And they gave me a muscle relaxer, which was kind of weird. It made my legs twitch. And then that time they sent me home, but they did give me a referral to a surgeon because it was an obvious case requiring a surgical referral. That surgical referral is still sitting in review. I can see it in my records online. Nobody's picked it up yet. So I sat around for like another week, I guess, until I decided once again that it was just too much. And I went into the emergency room again, and I told them, guys, this pain is so extreme. You know, it was getting to be sharp pain really consistently at that point. I told them I was feeling nauseous. I mean, I kind of was, but for the most part, frankly, not. But I told them what I had to tell them. And the doctor who was there that day was pretty good. He actually had a conversation with me, and I told him, look, man, I'm getting scared at this point. Like, you know, I've had so many relatives who have had to have their gallbladder taken out. My mom, my aunt, my grandmother, her mother. And I said, man, I'm getting nervous about this. Like this, I got 2 kids. I got a wife. I can't just let this problem go forever. You know, it's very obvious that there's a serious health issue going on here. I need some help with this. And he was a little bit skeptical, but I think the fact that I was turning down the narcotics probably helped. And so he actually brought in a little portable ultrasound machine and a student with him. And he did an ultrasound right there on the spot. I don't know why he felt the need to do another one, but he was looking at it, and he found where the stone was. And he said, oh yeah, there it is. That's a big one. And I don't know, maybe they get a lot of issues with like malingering going on there. I don't know what. But he said to a student, you know, I guess it's possible this guy's just here drug chasing. He said this right in front of me. I guess it's possible this guy's just here drug chasing. But, you know, I don't really get that impression. I think he might actually just want us to help him. And he said, okay, so you know what? I am going to go talk to a surgeon. Just hang tight here. And in the meantime, let's at least get you comfortable. Let's give you some morphine. And I told him, dude, I don't, you know, that's great and all, but I don't really care about that because that's temporary. Like, this is an issue that needs to be fixed. I need a permanent solution. I don't really care about morphine. And he said, okay, yeah, that's fine and all, but you might as well just be comfortable right now. This thing's not going to get dealt with instantly anyway. And I said, okay, fine, whatever. And so he gave me that, and then he went off to talk to the surgeon. And then like 10 minutes later, he came back and said, okay, I talked to the surgeon in Red Deer, which is a relatively nearby city of like 100,000 people, I think, which has a hospital that serves an area of 1 million people now because they rezoned everything relatively recently, I think, according to the nurses there anyway. But anyway, he came back and he said, yeah, the surgeon agreed to take it, which was kind of surprising because this was at like 10:30 at night, and that response came within about 10 minutes. So clearly, you know, somebody looked at that and thought, yeah, that's probably worthwhile. So anyway, I'm glad the surgeon was on the ball about this anyway. So he said, yeah, you're going to Red Deer. You might as well just go right after the painkillers are done and everything, and we get the IV out of you. Do you have someone who can drive you? Yes. Okay. Because obviously I just had some morphine, so I couldn't drive. So in the middle of the night, we pack up and do a 2-hour drive to the hospital. So we get to the hospital and go to the emergency room like he told me to do. And basically right away, there's a representative, like an assistant or whatever, of the surgeon there to talk to me and talk me through what's going to happen. And we have a little conversation, and he says, you know, as soon as you leave the waiting room, you're entitled to basically any painkillers that you want. You can just get them IV dripped in. Okay, sure, I guess I'll take that. I don't really care at this point. I figure this is going to get done pretty quick. But he also says, you know, because of the nature of the hospital, we're very busy. We serve a lot of people, big area. We do a lot of gallbladders. A lot of those are emergencies. It might take some time. You might be here for 3 or 4 days getting bumped as more pressing cases come in. So, oh, okay, well, fine. I'll take it. You know, as long as this thing gets dealt with, I don't mind. And I found out later from talking to the nurses that they really just don't have that many surgeons, and the surgeons they do have to get by sharing the same operating rooms, and like they're constantly getting bumped by other surgeons to do other surgeries, and that hospital is way too small for the area that it's serving. Fortunately, it is being expanded. They are doing a lot of construction on it. But I don't know if that's going to solve their problem, because the nurse also told me that since COVID, at night, they only have one anesthetist in the entire hospital. For whatever reason, they've lost like 7 anesthetists in the past few years. So it makes surgeries really, really hard to do at night. They're very jammed up with that. And so I waited in the waiting room for a few minutes, and then they called me into the like emergency room waiting area where they had these reclining chairs in a hallway. Unfortunately, the one that I was in didn't recline. It was broken. So I got to sit up uncomfortably in this weird, hard, reclining chair. And they came around and tried to take my blood for a blood test, and they couldn't find a vein. They were doing this thing. Wait, this thing in the arm. Jab, 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 jab. And then, start here, jab, 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 and then move here and do it, and then move here. They tried the hand. They couldn't get it there either. Eventually that one did get it. And then a little bit later, because I was sitting there for hours, till like 7 in the morning, another pair came along to try to take more blood for another test. And jab, 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 into the hand. And I'm sitting there. I mean, they jabbed me like 20 times. And then they said, listen, do you want us to just like give up and get someone else to do it later? I said, yeah, I think that'd be for the best, probably. Someone came along with a blood pressure machine, and it didn't inflate properly, and I didn't really notice because I was kind of out of it and tired. And they didn't notice, and so it read like 90/40. And then they looked at it, and they looked at me, and then looked at the machine, and they looked at me, and then they just kind of walked away. I was talking to this lady there in the chair next to me. I couldn't see her. There was one of those screens, but I was talking to her because she was talking to me. That was after the blood test. She was like, they couldn't get you, eh? No, they couldn't. I must just not have blood. I guess I'm just not the kind of person who has that. And she was telling me about all of her issues. She was in a much worse state than I was. I mean, years of problems. Some people have such serious long-term chronic health issues, and they just keep getting more and more health issues piled on top, and it's like their whole life becomes living in the hospital. I can't imagine what that's like. Especially after this experience, knowing what it's like for a few days. It just thinking about being there for months, or with some of these people even years, it's just unbelievable. Just incredibly hard to even contemplate that. But she was cool. I couldn't quite place her accent. It turned out she was Danish, though. I don't know if I've heard many Danish accents. Anyway, eventually I finally got to go upstairs and go to a bed, which was a surge bed, which was in what was formerly a TV lounge, which no longer has TVs. It has beds and curtains. And they took my blood there too. Lots of needles. Needles all the time. You get to go to sleep with a needle, wake up with a needle. It's lovely. But that lady managed to take my blood the first time, which was nice. I think there's a lot more pro up there. For some reason, they got the newbies working in the emergency room. I slept in a bed. Fortunately, it was relatively private. I had a curtain, and it was next to a window, so I had some natural light. And I stayed there for 2 days, getting stuck with needles constantly. To the point where I was honestly really quite fed up with needles. At some point I was like, what are these for? Why do you keep coming to stab me all the time? And fortunately they could get my blood the first time there consistently, but still I was like, why are you doing this? Like, what do you need blood this often for? And she said, I don't know. I'm just here to do it. The doctors order it. I said, okay, fine. And there's more needles for, because you're lying on a bed, so they don't want you to get deep vein thrombosis, so they give you blood thinner for that. And you're lying there, I wasn't even in a hospital gown or anything. I was just in my normal clothes for 2 days, no shower, just getting smelly on the bed. Really nice. And, I had no idea at this point what my prospects of getting surgery within a day, 2 days, 3 days were, or even if I would really get it within 3 or 4 days, like that one guy said. It was really just not clear because, they don't know, right? They don't know who's going to come through the door, if a baby's going to come through the door not breathing, and they're going to have to drop everything and go deal with that, which they did have to at one point. You'd be sitting there always hearing code blue through the whatever system announcement thing. And so at the end of the first day, you know, I sat there the whole day, all the way until 10 p.m. And then the nurse came along and said, well, you're canceled, so you can eat something. Some chicken broth and orange juice. Because before the surgery, you're not allowed to have any actual food for, I think, 4 hours. But they really don't want you to have any, like, food in general. So what you get is chicken broth and orange juice. And other than that, once a day, you're getting IV fluid, which keeps you hydrated, and I think it also puts glucose in your blood. And so you don't really get thirsty or hungry. You kind of have a bit of a feeling in your mouth, like I would kind of like to drink something. You kind of have this feeling like I would like to eat something. It would be nice to eat something. But you're not actually hungry, and you're not actually thirsty. I know for anyone who's had this type of surgery, you know all this stuff already. But, you know, for some people, this might be interesting. I hadn't had any of this. I would have been interested to know this. It's an experience that a lot of people have, but a lot of people don't, or at least not for a long time in their life. So anyway, yeah, the first day the surgery was canceled at like 10 or 10:30 or something, without me having known that it was scheduled in the first place, because they don't want to get your hopes up. So I ate something. I did my best to go to sleep. It wasn't very easy. You're always getting woken up by some IV machine beeping, or some nurse coming along to stab you with a needle, or someone talking, or code blue over the loudspeaker. Anyway, so I went through the whole next day. You know, it's not the most cheerful environment. It's not the easiest on anybody, on the family, anything. But, you know, whatever. You just sit and wait. At one point, they gave me a needle with what's called hydromorph. They don't even really ask you about it. They're kind of just like, here's a painkiller. We're going to stick this in you. They don't really tell you that much about it. But they gave me that, and it immediately made the pain go from like a 6 up to like a 10. Immediately, like within 30 seconds. And then after it was like that for a couple of minutes, it did start going down, and then gradually you don't feel any pain anymore. So I guess maybe the actual painkiller effect takes a little bit of time, at least for me, to take effect. I don't really know why it spikes at the start like that. It's very strange. I told the nurse about it. She didn't believe me. She said, oh, you must have just had a coincidental gall attack at the same time. It's like, yeah, I've never had anything like that. That's not a thing. That was definitely that stuff, and it was pretty much instantaneous. She said, nah, it must have just been a coincidence. Okay, whatever, but I refused it the whole rest of the time I was at the hospital. They kept trying to give it to me, too, but I told them, no, I don't want that. I want the basics. I do not need the hard stuff. It stings like hell going in, too. Like, it hurts, that stuff being squeezed into you. I really have no interest in it. It's just awful. It sucks. Anyway, that was the second day, right? So the second day went past, and then around 11 o'clock, the nurse came and told me I was canceled again, even though she thought that I would probably get the surgery that night or in the morning. So I thought, okay, well, it'll probably be in the morning then. So I ate something again. Ate as if it was really food, but, you know, still tasted pretty good after eating nothing but IV fluids into my arm for a whole day. Anyway, but the next day it became clear that I was getting closer to doing the surgery. The surgeon came and talked to me for 30 seconds and then immediately got called away for something. But then like an hour later he came back. We got to talk for a few minutes. And he told me, yeah, sorry for the wait. You know, I'm trying to get to you. But, I mean, you've probably heard how it is. I was like, yeah, I get it. I was like, I would really love for this to get done, but I do understand why it's not getting done right away. And, you know, he was cool. So that, I think, was in the morning, and then I sat around more and more and more, and then in the afternoon, I got taken to a room that has oxygen. After the surgery, they need an oxygen hookup, so if you're going to go to the surgery, you need to be in a bed where they can give you oxygen if need be, which, unsurprisingly, is not really the case in the TV lounge. So they moved me to a different room. The only room they had available was in the pediatric ward. They had a room there with like 4 beds that they were reserving for adult patients because they didn't have enough beds elsewhere in the hospital. And they didn't have so many kids there that it was a problem. We were separated from the kids. I didn't actually see any kids. The closest I got was like occasionally hearing a baby crying. Anyway, it was the Edmonton Oilers room. I got to look at a picture of some hockey player on the wall for entertainment for, turned out, about another day. The nice thing about this 4-person room in the pediatric ward was that it had a shower. They actually had a really nice bathroom with like a full tub shower and everything. So I got the nurse to unhook my IV and like bag up the connection. And so I finally got a chance to stop being absolutely disgusting. So that was nice. And then I changed into a hospital gown because I would need that for the surgery anyway. And I didn't have any clean clothes. Didn't really expect to need them when I left. Anyway, so I got to sit around there getting poked some more, hobbling around with my IV whenever I needed to get up. And then the next morning, the surgeon comes around, checking on people. He's looking at his lists of who he's going to do operations on. And he kind of stops in his tracks and he's like, wait a second, this guy's not on my list. He said, I really want that guy on my list. And so he told them, no, you got to switch this up. You got to put this guy on the list for today. This has got to get done. I actually didn't hear him say that. My wife heard it though, but she told me that. I was like, oh, finally, I'm getting really tired of IV fluid and pokes. And so yeah, the nurse came in and talked to me about how it's going to work. You know, she said, you sit around for a long time, it goes really slow and then it goes really fast. So be ready to go. They'll come with a stretcher and they'll just come and take you. So, you know, I got ready. I talked to my family. I wasn't really that worried about how things were going to go. This is very routine kind of surgery. It's the kind of thing, as the nurse said herself, it's the kind of thing they can do in their sleep. The only thing I was a little concerned about was the anesthesia. General anesthesia. I've never had it before. Obviously, they do know what they're doing with it. It is actually very safe, and really rarely does anything go wrong. And I have no family history of anyone having any negative reactions to it. Like, most people in my family have had some kind of surgery. And I knew, for example, that my heart was good. I just recently had an ECG and everything. But even so, you're getting put out with some pretty serious stuff. And then there's going to be some people poking around with, you know, sharp implements on your insides. If you're not used to that kind of thing, it is a little bit nerve-wracking. Whether it's justified or not, I mean, it sort of is, because although it's a very low-risk surgery, relatively speaking, it was the laparoscopic cholecystectomy. It wasn't the kind where they cut a big line, which is somewhat higher risk. But although it's comparatively low risk, it's still relatively high risk compared to a lot of things that you do in your life. Like, for example, there's a higher risk of death getting this surgery than if you drive for a year. In fact, I think it's quite a number of times more risky than driving for a year. So it's not nothing. It's the kind of thing where you do start to think about the people around you. You start to think about, you know, what if something happens? And not even just in the context of only this surgery either. Like, this is the first serious health problem that I've had. This is the first time I've had to go to the doctor for basically anything. At least anything meaningful. You know, and you start to realize, like, these aren't just things that happen to other people. You know, when you don't have these problems, it kind of seems very distant. But all of a sudden, this problem comes along in no time and hits you like a truck. And now you're sitting in the hospital for days. And now you're looking at getting a surgery. All these things that you didn't expect a month ago. And it just makes you realize, like, these issues can come up like that, like nothing. You know, you're there one day raising your kids, you know, you're having fun with them and your wife, and you know, you got all this stuff going on, and then all of a sudden you're not there to help them anymore. Maybe not in this circumstance, but it could be anything else in the future. And that is troubling to me. You know, obviously on this channel, the topic of death comes up a lot, and how to deal with the idea of dying. And the idea of dying itself, it doesn't even bother me at all, right? If it was just me, when they brought the stretcher and they took me out of the pediatric ward and down the elevator into this cold tomb-like hallway where you wait for your surgery, I was just sitting there and I was like, imagine if I hadn't had kids, and imagine if I didn't have a wife. I wouldn't even blink about this. You know, this wouldn't even be an issue at all. But I was sitting there genuinely worried about death, because I was thinking, you know, if I go to sleep and I don't wake up and my wife is sitting there in the waiting room, what is that going to look like when the surgeon comes and tells her about it? Right? What is it going to look like when my kids find out? One of them's too young to really understand it, but you know, what is it going to look like? And then what is my family's future going to look like without me there to support them? And that really was getting to me. I mean, I knew that in all likelihood, none of that was going to happen. I was going to wake up and everything was going to go back to normal after I healed. But this is probably not the last time. Or if it is, it's far from obvious that it's the last time. So what happens next time? What if it's worse? What if it's an open heart surgery? The thought of leaving them without me is absolutely crushing. That is, if anything, the fear of death that I have. But despite the fact that it causes that concern, I wouldn't change it because it also makes the entire situation much easier. Knowing that my wife is waiting there and she can greet me when I wake up is huge, enormous. Knowing that I can see my kids afterwards is just incredible. Knowing that I have those people to get through it for is very motivating to just get it done and get it fixed. I mean, I might not have cared nearly as much about this entire issue and pushed as hard as I did to get it dealt with if it weren't for them and needing to be there for them. And also, really, the idea of having a legacy, having my existence, my real, literal, biological existence carrying on in my descendants is very meaningful to me. I was really thinking to myself, like, if I had never had kids, and if I just died right now, I would be much less satisfied with the course of my life. Really, I would. Like, if I found out, once my kids are grown up and they're able to take care of themselves and they don't need me so much anymore, if I find out that I'm going to die of something, I don't think that'll hit nearly as hard as it would if I just, played video games my whole life and nothing else. Shut myself in my room and never had a family. It's the kind of thing where if you're anything like me and you get the opportunity to do that, I would recommend that you do. At least to me, it's very, very important. Anyway, so I'd already said I love you to my family and all that, and I got dragged down to the waiting hallway. And I talked to the surgeon a little bit, and he sent the anesthesiologist over. And he was a real pro. He answered all the questions that I had very precisely and clearly, which I very much appreciate, as you probably know. One of the concerns that I had, because I don't really know a lot about this, I mean, I didn't prep for this. I didn't do any research in advance. It's not a topic that I know about. One of the concerns I had was these horror stories that you hear sometimes about people having awareness under anesthesia. And so I asked him about that, and he said, well, that does happen. It's very rare. It's between 1 in 500,000 to 1 in 250,000. And that usually happens in higher risk cases like heart surgery or C-sections. And I think what he means by higher risk, I should have asked him this, but I think what he meant was cases where you want to avoid giving too much anesthesia because there's some risk factor to it. And so you're working with like the minimum amount that you can, making the person stay unconscious but kind of riding the line a little bit. I think that's the idea. And he said in your case, there's basically no risk of this. Also, we're going to put like probes, I don't know, like the little detector stickers on your head, and that's going to detect your brain waves. And so we're going to detect what state of sleep that you're in and make sure that you stay there. So that alleviated my concerns about potentially undergoing an hour of complete torture. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention that's kind of funny. I'm filming this after. The anesthesiologist went away and got a mask, like a surgical mask with the 4 strings that you tie at the back. And he rips off one of the strings and he's like, okay, can you like hold your beard and I'll just like tie it up. And so he ties like this little ribbon, this little bow tie on my beard. And he says, okay, just hold it down here. And he ties another one. And he's like, okay, great. And then the nurse comes over and she says, okay, I did not know that was what he was going to do with that mask. And then the nurse came along and she took me to the operating room and stopped the stretcher in front of the door. And I had to get up and walk to the table. It's like this weird table with like a squishy pink thing on top. I'm not sure what the purpose of it is. Maybe it's for grip. My understanding of this surgery is I think they kind of tip you like head down at an angle so that all your organs sort of flop up towards your head and then they can access under your liver better. I don't know if they did that in this case. I think that's how they do it, though. It's very creepy walking into this room. You know, you got someone like with a mop, just like mopping up all the who knows what that they have on the floor from the last person in there. Or maybe they just wipe the floor down every time between surgeries. Maybe there's nothing there. But it's kind of creepy. You know, you got everybody in their masks and they're all watching you walk in and get onto the table. And you crawl up onto the table and lie down. And there's this big light up there that's like 6 feet wide. Looks like a UFO hovering over your head. And they kind of very quickly, breathlessly explain to you what's going to happen. And they stick the things onto your head. And then they're just like, all right, so you got one job. And your job is to breathe from this oxygen mask. And they put the mask over your face and they're like, deep breath. Deep breath. Deep breath. And then wham! Like that. I'm in another room. I'm looking at some random lady that I haven't seen before. Instantly. Instant teleport. Just like one of these jump cuts that I have in my video. Literally no sensation of falling asleep, closing my eyes, drifting off, anything. Just, I'm breathing in from the mask and I'm in another room. Very cool. Really interesting experience. It's like total discontinuity of experience. Hey, later me again. I just thought I should probably tell that to Ponder Points. Ask him if I'm philosophically still the same person. You kind of have that with a deep sleep, but when you fall asleep, you still kind of have like a little bit of this I'm falling asleep thing and a little bit of this I'm waking up thing. With this, there was no falling asleep or waking up. At least not that I remember. In my memory, it's literally like a scene change in a movie. Okay, me again. The nurse asked me afterwards how things went, and I told her, actually, it was a really cool experience. Like, I just teleported. I actually kind of liked it. And she was like, oh, you like to get crazy high. I was like, no, I don't mean it like that. And then she told me about her experience with it when she had an operation, and she said she got really cold, like ice cold. She started shivering violently. They had to put all kinds of rescue blankets on her, and she was still aware of that happening while it was happening. And it sounds like it was a really scary experience, and she said, I never want to experience that again. Seems like my experience doesn't go for everyone. I don't know if it's a different chemical or if it's just a different response. Either way, definitely a very dissimilar reaction. And so I'm just lying there. I'm like, am I good? And the lady's like, yeah, you're good. And I'm like, yeah, but like, am I good? She's like, yeah, you're good. And then she goes over and starts shaking this other guy, this other guy in another stretcher next to me. And I think it was this guy, like when I was in the waiting hallway, which is seriously, it's like being in a morgue. It's so cold. But I was in this waiting hallway, and this guy came in on a stretcher right as, like a minute before I was taken away. I assume it was that guy. And she's shaking him, and she's like, David! Really aggressively. And I'm just looking over. I'm like, is David okay? Because, I don't want some guy to just die in a stretcher next to me. It just seemed so urgent, the way that she was shaking him. But I suspect that's probably just how they wake people up, because she was like, oh yeah, he's fine. And so then I kind of have a murky memory of being wheeled back up to my spot in the pediatric ward. I don't really remember it that well. Then I was on oxygen, apparently. I didn't even know that until right now. Next thing I remember was a cup of water with a straw, and they were like, take it easy. And then I just sucked down the water, and everybody started laughing. The nurse was like, that's hilarious. I don't know. I guess most people kind of just gingerly sip the water a little bit. But I just sucked down the entire thing all at once. I think I was very, very thirsty. They had told me before the surgery that sometimes you can feel nauseous, you can puke and stuff. They said there'd be a puke bucket nearby. I didn't need any of that. I was perfectly fine. Like, I instantly, as soon as I was out of the groggy state, I felt awesome. I mean, I felt better than I have in ages. It kind of helped that first evening you don't really feel the pain and everything that much. Or at least I didn't. I kind of have a dim sense of time for a while. At some point they brought food for me to eat. It was chicken with gravy and mashed potatoes and carrots and a cup of tea, and like, they had sides and everything. It was just the most incredible thing I'd ever tasted. It was the best chicken with gravy I've ever had after being on IV fluids and chicken broth for so long. And I had no issues with that whatsoever, even the gravy, nothing. Just no digestive issues whatsoever. People had told me, a lot of the people in my comments and stuff had told me, once you get this surgery, you're going to have to really watch out. You're going to have serious digestive issues. You're going to have a lot to get used to. Things just won't work the same anymore. For me, they work exactly the same, and they did from day one. Like, literally no change. I have a very strong suspicion that gallbladder had not been working correctly for a really long time. And I think that explains a lot of the issues that I had been having previously, even before the pain, where I just felt tired all the time. I just felt miserable. I was always thinking, how can I increase my energy? Like, again, am I just getting old? Like, why am I so low energy? Why can I not get anything done easily? Everything is exhausting. Maybe I had pain that I was not even really noticing, or just my system was not quite functioning exactly as it should. For months, probably. I don't know how long, but I think it's been a while that there was a problem. And so very likely my body has been getting used to essentially not having a gallbladder, even though it was there for quite a while. A while later, once I'd woken up properly and eaten something and sat around for a while, the surgeon came in and he talked to me about it, and he said, yeah, that gallbladder really needed to come out. He said it was extremely inflamed. So, despite the fact that I was not puking, I didn't have a fever, I didn't have all these things they said I had to have to be taken seriously, the surgeon knows best. He saw it with his own eyes, and he said, yeah, that really had to come out. So he was really glad that he bumped me up. He was glad that he did the surgery when he did, and I was really glad too. I told him that too. Then what else? So I stayed overnight again. So I had been in the hospital, including in the hospital in my town, since 3 o'clock on Wednesday, and then I got discharged, I think around noon-ish, or that's at least when I left the hospital, on Sunday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, about a total of 4 days that I was in there, including the hospital here. Got driven home, which was very uncomfortable. Every bump in the road, very unpleasant. That second day, things are a lot worse. Like, they hurt so much worse the second day. The first day, I don't know if it's like lingering effects of anesthesia, or you just, your body hasn't had time to react to it yet. I don't know. But it's definitely painful that second day. Oh, then what happened? Got home, immediately took my shirt off to show my family the damage. The disinfectant stuff that they use turns you pink, so I was pink from like here all the way down to the pelvic area. Just the whole thing, pink. Big shaved spot. 4 bandages, a couple here, and one over the belly button, and one up here. It's worse as well because they fill you up with gas. I think it's they have a camera, and they need to be able to see inside of you, and so they fill you up with gas so they can like look around with the camera. And so you're inflated like a balloon. And they tell you, yeah, we can't even give you painkillers for that. Like, that's not even going to work. That's just going to hurt. It's going to, like, gas is going to migrate up to your shoulder, and it's going to hurt. Everything's going to ache. Don't even ask for painkillers. It's not going to do anything. What you're going to have to do is burp and fart. Eventually, the gas will work its way out of your body. So, burp and fart the pain away. Me again. By the way, I'm not convinced that's actually true. In fact, I'm reasonably sure that it's not. But that's what the nurse told me. And then I guess there's not much else to it. I sat down on my comfiest chair and sat on my ass for like 10 days. I really wanted to just, heal up. I mean, I did get up occasionally and walk around and do stuff, and gradually was starting to get back to normal, but I still wanted to spend most of my time just letting things heal. But anyway, even from the first day, even when I was in pain, I feel so much better than I did before. Like, the improvement is just night and day. Not having like a ping pong ball sized thing stuck in the neck of an organ helps. And just not having that pain of sickness. Like, even when you have the pain of healing, it sucks, but it's temporary, it's getting better, that every day it's going to improve. And psychologically, that makes such a huge difference. Even now, I'm not fully healed up. I wouldn't go for a run or anything. Although I do intend to do that going forward, like running, going to the gym. Although I don't necessarily think that this was a product of general ill health, it is still kind of a health wake-up call. All of my health metrics are actually pretty good. Like, heart's good, blood pressure's good, blood sugar's good. I'm a pretty healthy person, surprisingly, despite my cheek chub. I don't even have that good of habits or anything. It's just somehow, I don't know, I managed to, up to this point at least, be relatively intact. But after this, I'm really realizing, like, I would rather keep it that way. And it really is, again, like, down to my family. I really want to make sure that I'm around for a long time. Around and capable. I mean, even just this past couple of months of really having very low capacity to get anything done, to provide, has been very demoralizing. And it just generally sucks. Like, if it was just pain, it would be one thing. But when you have people relying on you and you can't do what you need to do, that they're relying on you to do, that's very, very discouraging. So I don't want to have that situation again if I can avoid it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think there's a lot of things that I can do to improve my general health circumstances and just make everything better going forward. Have better chances of better outcomes as I enter really the second half of life. You know, that's another thing, is even before this, I had been kind of thinking, well, actually, even before this, I had been having like issues breathing and stuff. I said, you know, I kind of have just like a hard time pulling air in. I think that was to do with this too, because I don't have that anymore. Maybe that was what was making me think this way, but I was thinking, I'm coming up on 40. This will be the second half of life. I have a chance to stop and just reevaluate. What am I doing? What does life look like in the second half? What do I want to look like by the time I finally do go, you know? What do I want to have achieved for my family, for myself, publicly, right? Just everything. What do I want my final, score sheet to look like? And there's a lot of things I would like to have on there. Whether I can do it, I don't know. Whether I will do it, who knows? I do have a problem with procrastination, I'll admit. But, if I do get 40 years or something or more, that's quite a while. I can do a lot with that, I think. I think I've done a fair amount in the amount of time that I've had. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But I think I can do something. So yeah, a lot of room for improvement. By the way, in case you're curious what's behind the curtain, here. There we go. Nothing too exciting. I think the curtain's a better view. Anyway, that's a really different video from normal, for sure. I don't know if it has much value in it, but I guess it tells you what I do when I'm in a weird situation, health situation. Am I begging Jesus for a solution? No. No, that's what hospitals are for. And that's what they did, and I'm solved. So everything will be great going forward until the next one, I guess. Hopefully the next one's a long way away. Anyway, I will say, I learned something from this. I learned a lot of sympathy for the people who have much worse health issues than this and have to spend a lot more time in the hospital getting poked and getting surgeries and who knows what. I mean, best of luck to you if that's you. I don't envy you one bit. I've gained some amount of insight, small amount, into what that's like, and I can imagine that after a month or a year, I would be in a pretty rough state. I mean, even after like 3 days of waiting, like I was in a pretty rough state mentally already at that point, especially being stuck on IV fluids with no food or very, very little food, very occasionally. I was feeling pretty rough, honestly. It was not a nice feeling one bit. So I think, as frustrating as this was at times, it was kind of worth going through because I understand something that I didn't understand before in a more personal way than I would have, which is cool. That's something I think that's worth appreciating in general, even in a situation that kind of sucks. The nice thing about this situation is it had a clear resolution, which of course they don't always have. So I'm very, very happy about that. And again, I really don't envy people in a situation that doesn't have that. And I wish for those people, I talked to some of them in the hospital, and I wish for those people that there was something that I could say or do that would make it not like that anymore. But there isn't. I guess the best thing you can do is just what you're doing, which is, use the systems that are in place to try to get a solution if you can. So often these things can be completely unavoidable. They happen to people who do make the right choices generally. But I'm certainly looking forward to taking steps to increase the odds of a good outcome in the rest of my life. You're never guaranteed that, but you can help yourself. You can do yourself favors. And I will be doing that, and I hope the rest of you will be as well. If you make poor decisions, you're just increasing your risk of a poor outcome. And a lot of the time, it's just unnecessary. It's just completely pointless decisions. You could have just done something different. I don't know. I feel a little bit silly taking something this minor, really, as like a almost life-altering event. But I've watched people not do that, not take these things seriously when they happen. I've had family members who didn't take these things seriously and, didn't take the hint that they should make a change and have very, very bad outcomes as a result. And I just don't want that to be me. I don't want to be the one making a bad decision that I know I shouldn't be making and end up in a bad situation of my own making. So I don't think I will. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this ramble. I don't know if there was any value in it from your perspective. From my perspective, it's an interesting event in my life, and I wanted to talk about it. And I guess that's all there is to it. Anyway, we'll go back to normal from now on, back to the normal aesthetic. As you can see, anonymity is not really that important to me. It's really more of a style thing. And it's a style that I will keep. I will not be doing this all the time. Oh, and by the way, this whole period has not been great in terms of channel growth, finances, any of that. So, you know, if you want to support the channel or watch the back catalog or any of that, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Although, to be honest, the most important thing you can do is just stick around and actually watch stuff when it comes out. So, if that's you, thank you. I almost forgot the mask thing. I got to show you that. Hold on. All right. So, the problem is that if I leave this like this, it makes a big lump in the masks. So, I got to put this guy on like this. And that kind of holds it back. See? Holds it down here. And then I take my first mask layer like so. And that's got to like go down. This one makes me look like a burglar. But this has got to go basically like that. Looks like I'm going to do some kind of a, you know, bad thing. Then I got to put the top mask, and the reason I have to put the top mask is that under the studio lights, if you don't have a second layer, it'll be very, very clear view through to your skin. So basically, the mask will not look black. It will look partially skin colored. And then these glasses have a little hole cut into the mask. And there we go. And then, of course, the hat goes on top. So that's what we're dealing with. This does get pretty warm in the summer, especially with these bandages, which are, I don't know what they're made out of, but it's plasticky and it's stretchy, and yeah, it's kind of unpleasant, but it's not too bad. It's the jacket that really makes it bad. Fortunately, I don't have to wear pants when I film. That helps. Anyway, all right. I will see you later.